Guys, you know me, I do not impress easily, but today's sponsor actually shocked me. It's a brand new shaving company called House of Atlas, and they sent me their razor. Listen, I will rock the stubble, but I prefer to be clean shaven. And this razor is the best razor I've ever had in my life. It's got a weighted handle that feels like it was engineered for a champion, not some weightless garbage. And the precision trim edge, it cleaned up my sideburns and right under the nose, almost like I had a personal barber in the room. I used the shave cream, I finished with their aftershave, and I'm telling you, my skin feels smooth and refreshed, almost like I'm ready for success. This isn't grooming. I want you to think of this as self-care with swagger. And here's the kicker. House of Atlas is now in Target stores nationwide. That's right. Next time you're at Target, you're maybe grabbing some paper towels. Pick up a razor that's worth your time. I'm telling you, you can finally stop wasting your money on junk that doesn't perform. Grab House of Atlas next time you're at Target. Or right from home, just go to Target.com. Start shaving like you mean it. Francis Ngannou told a funny story. Said his phone rings. And it's Nikisa. Nikisa's calling him. And you guys will know Nikisa even if you don't recognize the name. Nikisa runs MVP. He and Jake Paul are partners. Nikisa's the guy that's on stage when the face-offs are going on, just for example. Nikisa has the authority and the ability to get anything within MVP and Jake Paul related done. He has that ability. And Francis knows that, and Nikisa calls Francis. This is Francis telling the story. Nikisa calls Francis and says, hey, we need your help. We need an opponent for Jake. Tank is out. And Francis says, all right. And Francis says, well, how can I help you? Nikisa says, well, we're looking at an opponent for Jake. Tank Davis is out. And Francis says, all right, but specifically, how can I help you? Nikisa takes a third swing at the bat. He says, well, we need an opponent. We need a boxer. We need a partner. We need somebody to fight Jake. Tank is out. And Francis asks him again, okay, what specifically can I do? And that's the funny part of the story, because Francis it wasn't calculating. He wasn't understanding that he was being offered this match. I can relate to that to a degree. About a month ago, I get a phone call from Craig Jones. And Craig tells me that Gable Steveson is out of the main event in 2 days. And he wants to know if I have any ideas. And I don't realize that he's challenging me. I don't even go that he's offering me the spot. I took it very matter-of-fact like. I'm going through my Rolodex and I'm thinking who would match up well and who could draw and who could we get a hold of and who would get on the plate. Like, I didn't understand what was happening. So when Francis tells this story that Nikisa's offering him the fight, but he's just not hearing it that way. Like, all right, you said you need help and you called me and I'm happy to help you, but you know what is it that I can do? So when Francis finally realizes it, he not only says no, he says he was offended. He said, Jake, you want me to bite Jake? Jake who? I said, Jake Paul. He said, that makes no sense. That's the last thing I would want to do right now. It's the last thing that I'm looking for. And, all right. Now that is a good and comical story. And I think that Jake Paul deserves a lot of credit for that. I would have really liked if that match would have gotten booked. I mean, I think that would just solve so many problems from a storyline perspective. And there's this story going on out there that and it has to do with courage. Now, how you ever question a combat athlete's courage, I think, is hard. How you ever question a boxer's courage, right? Where you've only got two things you can do, and they're both involve bludgeoning. You can't even grab a hold of the guy or try to squeeze him. You can only bludgeon and be bludgeoned back. I think you're got an uphill battle to question somebody. But they have been very effective in doing just that to Jake. Hey, you started with this NBA guy, and then even those MMA guys, they're not boxers. And then when you got around to the boxers, but they weren't current boxers. Then when you get around To the current boxers, they're not big enough boxers. And I just loved it. When I heard that Francis Ngannou might be going against Jake, I loved it. I mean, what's that going to look like? How many of those shots from Francis can you take? Tyson Fury, if you're talking clean, Tyson Fury only took one. Everything else, Tyson was able to roll with. Big Francis only had to hit him one time. Like, that's a compelling story, in my opinion. I would be interested in that. Now, I come from the boxing background where you largely leave the night disappointed. You leave if you're the host of the party because the walkouts and the announcements and the singing of the respected national anthems takes longer than the contest itself. And is that what's going to happen here? Right? I mean, it's one of those things. What difference does it make? We're attempting to tell a different story, and the story we're attempting to tell is about courage. And Francis says, it's not what I'm looking for. It doesn't make sense. And that's completely up to Francis. Like, I would be out of bounds to step in and go, Francis, this is exactly what you're looking for, and this makes a whole lot of sense. I would be out of bounds. But I don't understand how Jake would be asking more from Francis than Francis asked of Tyson Fury. I don't know how Jake would be asking more of Francis, more of a favor than Francis asked of Joshua. I wanted to understand that. And the Fury one you could wipe up just a little bit. I mean, Francis was not the UFC champion, but he was the UFC champion when they started that dialogue. So even if you got the greatest boxer ever, you do have the guy that was champion and never lost the belt, at least competitively. Like, there was something about that story that worked. Now, whatever the basis of that story is, you lose that story when you go into the fight with Joshua. Now, at this point, the UFC has long moved on. Francis has been in the ring and boxed. He's now not 0-0 in boxing. He's 0-1 in boxing. And Joshua took the fight very seriously anyway, and Joshua wanted the fight, and Joshua even campaigned for the fight. And somewhere in Joshua's mind, it made sense. And the outcome and what we witnessed from a physical standpoint also is what we expected, and it also made sense. But I don't regret a bit as a viewer having tuned in. I don't regret a bit as a viewer believing in Francis and thinking that Francis could provide some really great moments against Joshua after I had just seen Francis provide some really great moments against Fury. And at the end of the day, it wasn't a sporting event anyway. At the end of the day, it did not affect any rankings, and it wasn't on SportsCenter, and Jim Rome never talked about it, and no matter how beautiful of a shot got landed and captured on a still frame, it was never going to be the cover of Sports Illustrated. Like, it was just a cash grab. So it made perfect sense. And what part about fighting Jake doesn't? Was the money not enough? Because that came up. They actually asked him that. Francis said, no, it's not about, Francis' exact words. He goes, no, it's not about the money. If it was about the money, I would have said, I need more money. Said it was ridiculous, that he was insulted. It was disrespectful, rather, is the word that he used. And that it didn't make sense. I don't know of another option that Francis has right now. I don't know. That's not to say that he doesn't. I'm sharing with you. I haven't been informed that PFL, by example, is talking to him. Bare Knuckle is talking to him. Usyk is talking to him. Wilder. Fury. I don't have any idea that any of them are. And if you're a prize fighter, you got to fight to get the prize. It would seem to me, if you had an opponent with a promoter on the phone whose checkbook is flush, it would seem to me it makes perfect sense. But perhaps there's something I'm missing. I'm open to being wrong. But if you turn down fights that you don't think are hard, or you turn down fights for any reason, it really doesn't make you a courageous and noble man. It makes you unemployed. So if you're not unemployed, then what fight is it that you have?